Los Angeles, Playboy Mansion, 4:23 a.m., March 1978. Sandra Theodore stands barefoot by the window, two suitcases at her feet. The room is silent, but she can hear security moving below. Slow footsteps, radios clicking, the sound of a world that still thinks she belongs to it. Last night, she was one of the most desired women in America. Right now, she has 20 minutes to disappear. She doesn't know that in 2 hours, Hugh Hefner will wake up and find her room empty. She doesn't know her name will be erased from future plans, future photos, future stories. She doesn't know the next 3 months will be spent hiding, looking over her shoulder, starting over with nothing. But she knows this. Last night, for the first time, she refused to come when he called at 9. And in that moment, everything began to collapse. Pause. Because this didn't start tonight. It started 18 months ago, when a broke waitress saw a small newspaper ad and believed it was a door to freedom. Let us know where you're watching from, and we hope you enjoy the story. Sandra Theodore learned to carry plates the way other girls carried hope. Carefully, silently, never dropping anything even when her hands were shaking. The diner on Market Street smelled of burnt coffee and fryer grease, and at 6 in the morning, the regulars already looked tired of being alive. She smiled anyway. 21. Tips barely covered rent. Her father called drunk once a week, crying and promising to change. Her mother had died the year before, thin and quiet, in a hospital bed that smelled of bleach. Sandra shared a one-room apartment with a girl who slept all day and partied all night. At night, she lay awake listening to the city breathe and wondered if this was all her life would ever be. She saw the ad in a newspaper someone left on the counter. Playboy Bunny Auditions, Chicago. Paid travel. Accommodation. It felt like a door in a wall she had assumed was solid. In October, the hotel ballroom in Chicago was filled with more than 300 girls. Laughter echoed off mirrors. Makeup, hairspray, nervous hands. Sandra stood in line, heart racing, watching women who looked like they belonged to another world. When her turn came, a man in a dark suit glanced at her and said softly, "You're pretty, but not quite bunny." Then he slid another photo forward. Women posed for the magazine. "This," he said, "this is different." She was about to thank him and leave when another woman approached. "Wait, come with me." They took her to a quiet room where she was told someone close to Hugh Hefner had seen her photo and wanted a personal meeting. An address was written on a card. Not a mansion, just an apartment. That was where she met Bobby Arnstein. Bobby was elegant, 32, eyes tired in a way that felt permanent. She spoke calmly, like someone explaining the rules of gravity. "Hefner doesn't sell a magazine," she said. "He builds a world. In that world, there is hierarchy." She described the inner circle. Girls who lived at the mansion. Their own rooms. $1,000 a month. Parties, exposure, a life that made people stare. Then she added the condition without changing her tone. "You will always be available." Sandra signed the papers. The NDA was thick and written in a language that felt intentionally impossible. In November, she arrived at the Chicago mansion. Satin robes hung like uniforms. 50 people drifted through rooms lit with low gold light. At 9, Hefner appeared in his silk pajamas, calm, amused, untouchable. He barely noticed her. Bobby whispered, "He sees you. Now show him you're worth the time." 3 days later, they brought her to a studio. Pompeo Poser adjusted his camera and said gently, "Relax. Everyone starts this way." The word test vanished the moment her clothes were gone. She hesitated. Then thought of the diner, her father, the $1,000, the promise of escape. She nodded. When the shutter clicked, she told herself she was choosing this, that she was in control. And for a moment, standing between poverty and gold, she believed it. In December, Sandra was told to pack. Los Angeles. The main mansion. The words landed like a reward she hadn't realized she was competing for. Her room was on the second floor, the corridor reserved for girls who were being considered. The first week felt unreal. Sunlight on the pool, film screenings every night, food she didn't have to count coins for. Money appeared in envelopes. Everyone smiled. She slept with the windows open and thought, I made it. The schedule came quietly, slid across the table by Bobby in January. 9 p.m. appearance required. No leaving after 6 without approval. No guests. Mandatory parties several nights a week. Sandra looked up and asked, half laughing, "What if I just want to go out?" Bobby didn't laugh back. "Then you're saying you don't value the opportunity." That was when the air changed. The rules weren't suggestions. They were walls. The other girls accepted them with practiced ease. "This is how it works," one said, adjusting her robe. Sandra watched Brenda, 20, restless, talk about meeting a man for dinner. The next morning, her room was empty. No explanation, just absence. Nobody asked. In February, Hefner invited Sandra to a private dinner, just the two of them. She wore a simple dress and told herself this meant something. He was charming, thoughtful, spoke about art and freedom as if he had invented the concept. He showed her old films, talked about building a life outside convention. Near the end, he smiled and said, "You're special." Then, lightly, "We'll continue tomorrow." 9 o'clock? She walked back to her room floating, convinced she'd been chosen. By March, the illusion thinned. She met Sherry one night in the hallway, 27, drunk, shaking. "I tried to leave," Sherry whispered. "Twice." She laughed without humor. "Where would I go?" From her bag, she pulled folded papers. A contract. If you left early, you paid back everything. Rent, food, shoots, $47,000. A debt designed to keep you still. April brought Sandra's first real check. $1,000. That afternoon, Bobby reminded her about $800 for living expenses. $200 left. The next morning, Sandra opened the magazine and saw herself. Published. No warning. No conversation. When she asked, Bobby pointed to a clause she'd never understood. That night, Sandra lay awake listening to laughter downstairs, realizing the cage wasn't locked from the outside. It was built around her piece by piece, until fear became routine. And for the first time, the question formed clearly in her mind. How do you leave a place that pretends you're free? By June, Sandra had learned how to smile without feeling it. 6 months inside the system had taught her timing, when to speak, when to disappear, how to look present while mentally stepping away. Publicly, she was thriving. Photographs, parties, casual mentions in gossip columns. Privately, she felt hollowed out. She was now girlfriend number 4 out of 7, a ranking never spoken aloud, but understood by everyone who lived there. In July, during a crowded party thick with smoke and laughter, Sandra met Deborah Jo Fondren. Deborah had already survived her moment of being chosen and discarded. They spoke quietly near the pool, away from the music. Deborah watched the mansion like someone watching a storm she'd already escaped. "You remind me of Bobby," she said suddenly. She thought she could master this place, outsmart it. Deborah smiled thinly. Now she runs it for him. Sandra followed her gaze to Bobby, clipboard in hand, efficient and invisible. The realization settled hard. This wasn't a promotion. It was what happened when you stopped being useful in one way and were repurposed in another. Sandra saw her future reflected there. Older, quieter, still trapped. August brought the first open act of resistance. Sandra woke with a fever so high she could barely stand. At 9 p.m. she stayed in her room. The next morning, Bobby called her in. "Hef is concerned," she said carefully. Then the warning, equally careful. "The others manage to show up even when it's difficult." Sandra nodded, but something sharp rose in her chest. For the first time, fear was joined by anger. In September, Brenda returned, the same girl who had gone home. She looked smaller now, worn down. They spoke in whispers. Brenda told her the truth. Casting agents turned her away. Her family refused to help. Every door closed the moment they heard where she'd been. "I came back because there was nowhere else," she said. Sandra understood then how the mansion didn't just hold you, it erased your exit. October brought celebrities and excess. Sandra stood wrapped in satin while a well-known actor leaned close and laughed. "You girls are beautiful," he said. "Like dolls. Perfect, but not real." He walked away without noticing her face had gone still. That night, the full picture finally aligned. She wasn't a model. She wasn't a girlfriend. She was inventory. Replaceable. Owned. By November, the decision was made. She would leave. But not yet. Not loudly. She would smile, comply, disappear in plain sight. The most dangerous phase wasn't rebellion, it was preparation. And for the first time since she'd arrived, hope returned. Not as a dream, but as a plan. Christmas arrived wrapped in champagne and noise. The mansion glittered under artificial cheer, every room crowded with guests who believed this place was joy made permanent. Hefner handed each girl a small velvet box. Inside Sandra's lay a diamond bracelet, heavy, deliberate. $3,000, someone whispered. She smiled, thanked him, played her part, then locked herself in her room and stared at it until the shine felt accusatory. It wasn't generosity. It was accounting. January nights were the hardest. Sleep came in fragments. One night, restless and wired, she wandered into the kitchen at 3 a.m. Tony, one of the guards, sat there nursing burnt coffee. He didn't flirt, didn't pry. After a while he said, "You're not like the others." Then, quieter, "You're still looking for a way out." He told her a story instead of offering help. A girl who had tried to leave through the front gate, caught 3 blocks away, brought back because she had nowhere to go. "That's the trick," he said. "Not the gate, the destination." When he left, he forgot a slip of paper on the table. An address in San Diego. His sister. Rooms for rent. No questions. Money was the next problem. Sandra counted everything she had ever been paid. $16,000 on paper. After deductions, $2,400 in cash. Not enough to survive long. Not enough to disappear. The bracelet became the answer. She told everyone she'd lost it during a party. Security searched. Hefner comforted her with practiced warmth. 2 weeks later, she sold it quietly in Beverly Hills for less than it was worth. Speed mattered more than pride. Now she had $4,500 and something she hadn't felt in months. Leverage. In mid-February, she went after the contract. Bobby's office door stood open during a party. An accident that felt like permission. Sandra moved fast, heart pounding, photographing key pages with a Polaroid she'd borrowed. She learned what she already feared. Leave early. Owe everything. Then she saw the exception. If confidentiality was breached by the company, the contract dissolved. A crack. Small, but real. The final piece came unexpectedly. Late one night, Bobby joined her in the kitchen, drunk and unguarded. She spoke without prompting, about believing she was special, about being allowed to leave, on paper, about the quiet threat that followed. "He doesn't chase," Bobby said. "He waits. And he knows things." Her eyes cleared for a moment. "If you go, don't fight. Don't explain. Vanish." The next morning, Bobby remembered nothing. On February 28th, Sandra laid everything out on her bed. Cash hidden in a suitcase lining, an address, photographs of the contract, a date circled in her head. March 18th, a release party. Chaos. Cover. She wasn't dreaming anymore. She was calculating. And every calculation pointed to the same truth. Freedom would only come if no one noticed she was gone. By March 1st, Sandra lived in two timelines. Outwardly, nothing had changed. She laughed at dinners, floated through rooms, accepted compliments with trained ease. Inwardly, every day was counted, measured, stored. 17 days until March 18th. 17 days to stay invisible. Tony had passed word to his sister. The money was hidden. The plan was clean. All she had to do was not attract attention. On March 3rd, Hefner asked her to join him for a private screening. Just the two of them. Casablanca flickered across the screen, shadows and longing. When it ended, he spoke as if continuing the film. "Ilsa stays," he said. "Love isn't always escape. Sometimes it's choosing where you belong." Sandra nodded, heart racing. His gaze lingered. "You seem tense lately. Everything all right?" "Just tired," she lied. "Good," he said, "because I'm preparing something special for you." 5 days later, at a formal dinner, he made the announcement. Barbie, the current #1, was moving on. Everyone knew what that meant. Applause sounded wrong. Then Hefner smiled. "Which means the position is open." He called Sandra into the library afterward. The room smelled of leather and age. He poured cognac and spoke softly. He had been watching her for 16 months, he said. She had depth, intelligence, something the others lacked. He wanted her as his main girlfriend. The offer unfolded like a contract disguised as a dream. 3,000 a month. Private apartments. Covers. Interviews, visibility. Then the conditions, delivered without pause. Exclusivity. Total availability. 3 years, minimum. And the sentence that froze her. As #1, you don't simply leave. Sandra asked for time. He looked surprised, almost offended, but agreed. "Not too long," he said. "Let's say by the 18th. The date landed like a trap. Barbie found her packing a few days later. The bravado was gone. "I gave him everything," she said. "And when I was done, I was nothing." She told Sandra what it meant to be #1. No refusals, no privacy, no exit. "I'm going home," Barbie said, "to a small life, but it's mine." From that moment, the pressure closed in. Bobby watched her closely. Other girls whispered. Security lingered longer. Tony warned her quietly, "Be careful." On March 16th, Hefner invited her to dinner again. This time, the charm was stripped bare. "I offer you everything," he said. "Why hesitate?" "Because I'm afraid I'll disappear," she answered. He smiled thinly. "There is no self here, only roles. You play, or you leave the stage." The ultimatum followed. Her or the 19-year-old waiting eagerly in the wings. At midnight on March 17th, Sandra sat on her bed, suitcase hidden, heart steady. Tomorrow, he would announce a queen, or discover she had vanished. At mid:30, Bobby stood in Sandra's doorway, eyes unreadable. "Hef wants to see you. Now." The hallway felt longer than ever. Sandra walked steadily, rehearsing nothing. Panic would waste energy. Hefner sat with a glass of whiskey. Barbie was there, gone, but not gone. He spoke gently, as if correcting a misunderstanding. Barbie repeated lines that didn't belong to her voice. Sandra watched her hands tremble and understood the performance. When it ended, Hefner smiled. "Get some rest. I'll see you tonight, with your answer." Sandra didn't sleep. By morning, the plan shifted. She would leave at 7, late enough to avoid suspicion, early enough to outrun it. The mansion turned frantic. Stylists, caterers, noise. At noon, she moved her first suitcase to the garage, hiding it behind stacked furniture. At 2, Tony pressed keys into her palm. 19:15, 3 minutes. At 4:30, Bobby delivered a silver Halston dress. "He wants you in this." Sandra smiled, pulled jeans on underneath. Mobility mattered more than elegance. At 6:15, Hefner changed the schedule. The announcement moved earlier. Suspicion sharpened. Sandra recalculated. Now or never. At 6:45, Jessica came to her room, eyes red. "He chose you." There was no envy left, only fear. Sandra told her the truth, quietly. "This place isn't freedom." Jessica shook her head. "It's better than nothing." They hugged like strangers at the edge of different lives. At 7, Sandra locked the door, stripped off the dress, grabbed her bag. Corridors blurred. In the garage, voices passed close enough to smell cologne. The service door opened. Cool air. No alarms, no shouts. She ran. At the park, the car wasn't there. Her breath hitched once. Then headlights appeared. Tony's sister didn't ask questions. The mansion shrank behind them. 2 hours later, Sandra lay on a narrow bed in San Diego. At 11, the radio announced the new girlfriend. Not her. Just another name. She expected rage, retaliation. Instead, replacement. Sandra turned off the radio and cried, not from loss, but release. She was gone. And for the first time, that was enough. Sandra woke the next morning unsure if the silence was real. The room was small, anonymous, hers, no schedule, no knock at 9. At 10, the phone rang. She let it ring. Bobby's voice came later on the answering machine, tired, almost kind. "Please call me." Sandra never did. The messages faded. Then they stopped. Erasure, she learned, was their cleanest weapon. April brought reality. Jobs asked questions she couldn't answer cleanly. 18 missing months hung in the air. When someone guessed where she'd been, their tone shifted. Polite distance replaced interest. She learned to rewrite herself. A closed family business, freelance work, half-truths layered until they held. She found work in a diner again. Less money, fewer illusions. At night, she counted bills and felt strangely calm. Freedom was expensive, but it was honest. In July, a newspaper headline stopped her breath. Bobby Arnstein, dead. Official explanations avoided details. Sandra read the article twice, then folded it carefully. She didn't attend the funeral. Instead, she lit a candle alone and whispered thanks to a woman who had warned her when it mattered most. Years passed unevenly. In 1980, she met another former model who had rebuilt a quiet life. They spoke without nostalgia. Neither wanted to go back. In 1982, she ran into Jessica by accident. The glow was gone. 2 years at the top had emptied her. They sat together, not rivals anymore, just survivors at different stages. Sandra shared a number. That felt like balance. By 1984, Sandra lived in Seattle. She worked in marketing, Married a man who valued calm over spectacle. He didn't know everything, only what she could carry without shaking. In August, a courier delivered a legal envelope. An offer. $10,000. Silence. Forever. She showed it to her husband and told him the truth she'd never said aloud. He listened, then said simply, "You left. That's what matters." She signed, took the money, burned the last photographs. One scrap of paper survived, a note she'd found long ago in Bobby's handwriting. Live. Years later, watching a televised celebration of the mansion, Sandra saw the same smiles, the same promises. She felt no anger, only distance. Freedom hadn't made her famous or rich. It had made her real. And that, she knew, was worth everything.